you, everybody, for giving of your time, especially the person sitting in Australia at 9 p.m. at night. We hope we can keep you awake for the next hour at least. So many of you will have heard this story, but let me just start with this because it is still quite a graphic tale, and it really does explain why I am so committed to this framework 30 years on from when I was first introduced to it. When I was first introduced to the framework, and it was very much in its infancy, not well developed at the time, but I was part of a management team in what was at the time the biggest commercial explosives factory in the world. And we were in big trouble. We literally had 2 explosions. We killed 14 people. And our owners, who were British based, literally came out, pinned our ears to the wall and said, "We don't kill people. So fix this or we close you down." And it was under those circumstances that, and I can still remember this very clearly to this day, we sat down as the management in this huge, on this huge industrial site, and we worked out that if you've got a safety problem, you've got a people problem. If you've got a people problem, you've got a leadership problem. In other words, we were the problem. And what was hugely significant about this is we then devoted ourselves for the next 3 years not to improving the safety metrics, even though that's obviously what we wanted. We didn't commit ourselves to try and change our people because you can't change people. All we did was we fixed and deliberately focused on changing ourselves. And we clearly did that well because 3 years later, we were acknowledged to be the safest commercial explosives factory in the world. And it was the same factory, the same people. The determining thing that had changed was the way we led them. So at the time, we spoke about this framework as literally giving us a golden thread and something that we kept coming back to as we really grappled in a very difficult situation to try and improve the safety performance in our factory. And it was my personal experience of this then that led me to leaving the corporate world and spending the last 30 years with some of my colleagues who are on this call and other colleagues who aren't on this call, really dedicated to trying to help, and I want to carefully use these words, the brave men and women, one of whom is Tony Flanagan, another is Sean Hager, another is Rachel Cohen, that you can see on these calls. Leonie Fontonda is another one. In other words, people who embraced this approach to leadership. And it was an original and pioneering and different approach to the conventional approach to leading people. And 30 years on, I'm happy to say probably about 300 organizations across the world have actually embraced the principles, the practices, the methodology of legitimate leadership. And they've actually done some astounding things with it. So the basis of this entire framework, I mean, if you said, what is legitimate leadership all about? I would say, well, essentially, it's a framework for understanding what accounts for trust in the management of an enterprise. I mean, that was its beginnings, and it still remains core to what this framework is all about. So I would like to, first of all, explore with you this whole idea about what does, in fact, account for trust in an enterprise. I would like to pause at that point. Maybe we can have some discussions, some debates, some questions. And then I would like to end today, if I may, answering 2 questions. The first is, how do you, as a manager, an individual person in a position of authority in an organization, how do you actually gain trust? Because at the end of the day, trust is gained one person at a time. So if you want to change an organization, you've literally got to, over time, help each and every person in a position of authority to gain trust from the people that they exercise that authority over. And the second question, if we've got time, will be, so if you wanted, because you're in a senior role, you wanted to take this framework and as the collective senior leadership now, if you like, of the organization, you wanted to actually implement these principles, these ideas in your business, what are the 4 things that you'd have to do? And I have to say these 4 things are radical. So legitimate leadership is not a tool, it isn't a technique, it isn't something you put in a week and you're done with it. It actually requires you to make some fundamental changes to the way you actually lead a corporation. Okay, so if we start with, and there's the question, Tony's got it up, thank you very much. So why, in the first instance, is it so important that there is trust in the management of an enterprise? And really, in my mind, there are 2 reasons why trust is so important. The first is that there's a corollary between trust in management and the degree to which people within the organization are prepared to go above and beyond in pursuit of that organization's objectives. So almost, if you like, there's a cause and effect relationship between trust and employee willingness. That's the first reason. The second reason is that trust is a vital ingredient when, as the leaders of an organization, you want to effect change. If there is trust in the relationship you have with your people, you can actually lead them through transformative change. If there is lack of trust, or worse still, distrust between you and your people, even somewhat simple changes, I mean, like if I'm as ridiculous saying you want to change the shift pattern, you want to change the working conditions, those much smaller, almost mechanistic changes become almost impossible to do because, simply speaking, you haven't got your people with you. So trust is so important because it is the golden, almost, if you like, insight into employee willingness. And we all know that organizations made up of willing and motivated people will outperform organizations where people are not willing and motivated. And secondly, there's a clear link between trust and employees' willingness to embrace change. Okay, so when you say to, as we do, managers and organizations, so, to what degree do the people in your organization trust you? And not only that, I mean, what would you point to as an indication of this? And I have to say 9 out of 10 managers say, we go back to the latest employee engagement survey. That tells us whether we're trusted or not. This is a little bit of a side topic. I don't think an employee engagement survey tells you anything much about trust. It tells you how happy your people are at a point in time and what are some of the factors that are currently making them not happy. Okay. So from a legitimate leadership point of view, we would advocate, quite frankly, we did 20 years ago, we still do, a far more, if you like, direct approach to this issue. And if you think about it for a moment, if you want to know whether your people trust you or not, why don't you just ask them? See what they say. And this is what they did in the mining industry. And here, Tony, just to correct you on this point, the sample size was not 7,000, it was 70,000. Okay, and put that into perspective. This was before we had the internet. So this was people going out onto these mines, going to miners, sometimes going underground to speak to these people and asking them this question. And it was literally this: do you find the management in this mine to be totally trustworthy, relatively trustworthy? You don't know whether to trust them, yes or no. You find them relatively untrustworthy, or you don't trust them as an inch. And the data that was gathered was then put in a 21-point scale. So if you like, if we trust the management on this mine totally, it's +10. The opposite is -10. The expectation, and I have to say this was late 1980 South Africa, it was towards the back end of apartheid. The relationships in general between management and employees were horrendously poor. The expectation was we're going to get scores, as you see there, like -2.2, -1.4, -0.4, or worse. And indeed, there were mines where management wasn't trusted, but here was the unbelievable finding at the time that despite the prevailing conditions in the industry, there were mines where management was highly trusted. Wow, fabulous. Great news. The question is, why were they trusted? And there were a number of assumptions that were made at the time, like surely if you pay people more, they'll trust you more. Or if you improve the working conditions underground, you're going to get higher levels of trust. Or if you've managed to keep a union off your mine, then your people are going to trust you more, etc., etc. And I have to say, not a single one of these assumptions turned out to be true. They did not account for trust in the management of the mine. And the researchers had almost given up answering this question when they asked a different question. And this time, the question they asked is, has trust changed on the mine in the last 12 months? And if so, why so? And that's when the answer literally came. If Tony can just put that up. Literally speaking, people said, I will either grant management or withhold from management my trust based on my perception, and that's the important thing. You can't tell people that you have a genuine concern about their well-being. They make up their minds about that. Only when they believe that the management genuinely is concerned about them as human beings, not human resources, will they in fact grant trust to those in charge of an enterprise. Okay. In other words, to what degree are the people of the mine convinced that, if I can put it this way, that management is prepared to suspend their own agenda for their people's agenda? In other words, they're prepared to put their people's needs first. So this then developed and crystallized out into what is a core concept in this model. And that was this whole idea or concept of intent. And really the fundamental finding that we have validated, reinforced over and over again in the last 25 years is a view that as a manager or as a leader, you ultimately stand or fall on the basis of your intent. And I'm going to explain that in a moment. And this idea of intent is what determines your success or failure is true in any relationship. It's not only true in a vertical relationship between management and employees. It's true between members of a team. It's true between colleagues within an organization. It's even true between customers and suppliers. In any human interaction, we judge the other party on the basis of how we perceive their intent. Okay. Now, this is going to sound like a very crass example, but it makes the point. If a robber attacked you with a knife and didn't kill you, you would fight, resist this person any which way you can. But we are prepared to subject ourselves, if you like, to willingly allow somebody to do just this to us, cut us open with a knife. That person is a surgeon. The surgeon and the robber are doing the same things to us. We can't be enjoying the experience any which way. But the reason we're prepared to subject ourselves to the surgeon's knife is because we intuit that the surgeon is doing this not very nice thing to us to help us and to heal us, rather than to do us harm, or rather in pursuit of their own interests. So intent is about motive. It's not about what you do or how you do it. Intent is literally about why you do it. Okay. So I'm going to ask, who shall I ask here for a moment? What about Elizabeth? Do you mind putting your picture on for a moment, or if you can? She not there? Okay. Teresa, there's Liz Barnes. Hi, Liz.
Sorry, I didn't.
Sorry, we've caught you at a bad moment. So let's assume, Liz, you and I are in a room together. I'm the facilitator. You haven't brought a pen. And I say to you, oh, Liz, don't worry. I've got one very nice, legitimate leadership pen. But here you go. Please take my pen. You don't have to give it back. Be my guest. Okay. Sylvia, is it Sylvie or Sylvia?
Sorry, let me unmute myself. Sylvie, because I'm French Canadian, but yeah, in English it would be Sylvia. The equivalent would be Sylvia.
Right. Okay. Well, let's call you Sylvia, if I may. Let's
Sure.
say you're also in the same room with Liz. You also don't have a pen. This time I say to you, here's a pen. It's a legitimate leadership pen. You're welcome to it. But Sylvie, if I give you my pen, then I need you to agree with everything that I say to you for the rest of this session. Okay. Now, if there was a camera in the corner of the room, in this instance, the camera would see what I was doing with Liz and what I was doing with you as identical. In both instances, I'm handing you over a pen. But motive, as it says there, is about why. Okay. Why am I giving Liz a pen? Because she needs it and I'm trying to be helpful to her. In your case, I'm giving you a pen so that you then feel obligated to agree with everything that I say. Okay. So this is the critical point here, is when you are giving to get, which is the case for Sylvie, I'm not giving, I'm taking. This is the investment I'm making to get out of her what I want tomorrow. Okay. So when we talk intent, in essence, we're talking about, are you in the relationship with this person to give to them or to get from them? And those are two fundamentally different intents. So the first sort of almost conclusion from the research initially, if we can go to the next slide, is simply this, that in any relationship, but let's talk about a position where you've got a manager and direct reports in a hierarchical relationship in the workplace, people, direct reports, will only go the extra mile if they are convinced that the manager, their manager, is in the relationship to give to them, not to get something out of them. And given that when you ask managers and organizations, tell me what's your job, 85% of them will say, my job is to get results out of people. In which case they are experienced as being in the relationship with the intent to get from their people, not to give them something. Now, I said the initial research tried to look at what were the correlations between trust in management and other factors like money. And amazingly, at the time, they found that money had no bearing on whether people would actually, if you like, trust management or not. So this give that we're talking about is not a giving of money as such. It's not even a giving of things. And the question, therefore, is what is this give that managers need to make in order for their people to be willing or to go the extra mile? And we answered that question by asking people another question, and that question was simply, so who is the person who would work for willingly? In other words, who's the person that when they ask you to do something, you'll do what they ask of you and much more. You'll go above and beyond for this person. And I mean, I say this with a smile because after 30 years, I'm sure that somebody is going to say this before I stop working. I keep waiting for someone to say, the person I'd work for willingly, oh, I know, he stroke she who pays me the most. Okay. In 30 years, no one has ever said that. In other words, it's not money, it's something else. So if Tony can put up a typical list, that's what people say when you ask them the question, who would you work for willingly? They give you a string of adjectives, as you see up here. And we've looked at these lists over and over again. And we finally came to the conclusion that behind all of this detail, if you like, there are in fact only 2 drops of essence. So on the one hand, in blue here, you have words that have a softness in them, supportive, respectful, approachable, kind, compassionate, helpful, empathetic, these kind of things. Okay. And we ended up calling this care. In other words, people work willingly for somebody who sincerely and genuinely cares about them as a human being, as a human being, not a human resource, who cares about them not because they make their bottom line grow. Okay. And if we're back to giving is only giving, if it is unconditional, this care needs to be genuine. It needs to be something you're doing, not out of expectation to get something back. And then there are some hard words in this list. And the one I always point to is the one that says, honest with me. So, Matthias, if I may, please be my boss for a moment.
Sure.
I want you to be absolutely unflinchingly honest with me. You tell me as it is. What's the chance you're going to tell Wendy something she's not going to enjoy hearing very much?
Right now?
Yeah. I mean, like if you are my boss and you're absolutely honest, are you going to say something because you're being honest with me that I'm not going to enjoy hearing very much?
Yes, I would do that.
Not only will you do it, it's guaranteed.
I should do it.
Yeah, it's guaranteed. And the reason it's guaranteed is because no one this side of the grave is perfect. Okay, so why do I want Matthias to be honest with me? And even though I find that difficult to hear on occasion, simply because it's only if he's honest with me that I know what I need to change, I know what I need to do to improve. In other words, so I grow. So fascinatingly, we found over time that, and this was a significant thing, it didn't matter who you asked this question of. If you ask somebody on a mine in South Africa, who would you work for willingly? If you asked Elizabeth and her colleagues in Austria, who would you work for willingly? The answer is the same. I will only work willingly for somebody who does two things for me, cares for me, and grows me. And whilst people think that care and growth are human needs, which they are, the real reason why this is the universal answer to the question, who would you work for willingly, is that care and growth are actually, this was our final insight, they are the universal criteria for any legitimate relationship of power. They are what makes power legitimate. In other words, there is a price to pay for legitimate power. It's not money, it's care and growth. Or, as it says on that slide here, if we put it in clean English for a moment, you can pay someone as much as you like. If you don't deliver on these two criteria, care and growth, they'll never be willing. Okay, so let's take this for a moment and let's try and put it into an organizational context. Okay, and in an organization, you have a hierarchy, you have power. The higher up the hierarchy you go, the more power you have. Now, typically in any hierarchy, and it doesn't matter the nature of the business, let's say you go to a manager at a point in that hierarchy and you ask the manager, what do you have to report on up the line? What does the CEO want to know from you? And their answer will be, they want to know the results. That's what I have to report to up the line. But because I don't personally deliver those results myself, I look to my supervisors to give me the numbers, who in turn look to the employees to give them the numbers, and so on up the line. Okay, now when you look at this picture, the first thing that strikes one fairly obviously is, guess what? The line of services up the line. This is management. Managers are here to get results out of people. No wonder they don't have willing people. Okay. Now, what is even more significant when you look at this picture here is that there is someone missing from the picture. And that someone who's missing is the all-important he/she, the customer. In other words, there is someone that stands between the people in the front line of the business and the result. And it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing in your business, unless the customer's prepared to pay for the product or service that you produce, you don't have a sustainable business. So from a legitimate leadership point of view, what we are saying is necessary for long-term sustainable organizational performance is simply this, that we make the most important person in our organization, the people at the front of the business, the people who serve the customer, and we make everybody else in the business, all the managers up the line, make their business to care for and grow these people. This inversion, if you like, from I'm here to get results out of people to I'm here to care for and grow them, that's what produces sustainable organizational performance. Okay, we're unlikely to solicit unconditional giving when we have takers in charge. Simple as that. So what is the transformation that legitimate leadership endeavors to make or help managers to make? Is this intent shift from being here to get to being here to give. So very, very quickly, almost to pull this thing together. Right. So here I am. I'm an individual leader in an organization. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter whether I'm a supervisor, I'm a middle manager, or I'm the CEO. What can I do? Love what Tony has to say. That's totally within my control. That will actually end up having my people trust me. And I've put it up as follows. Number one, and sort of almost absolutely at the core of this, is I need to consistently pass the intent test. And what do I mean by that? Intent test means I consistently put my people's interests before my interests. When things go really well, they get the credit, not me. When things go really badly, I take the blame. I don't blame them. In other words, I'm putting their interests before mine. Every time you do that, trust in you increases an increment. Then I need to change what I spend my time on and what I give my attention to. And that can be a radical shift. Because if you think about it this way, you spend time on and give attention to those things that you care about. So if you don't spend time with your people, they can draw only one conclusion, that whatever it is that's important to you, it's not them. And then thirdly, in your day-to-day leadership practice, this is not anything that you do, but you do this day in and day out. You actually demonstrate through your leadership practice the following. And as it says there, this isn't rocket science. People trust people who care about them. Firstly. Secondly, people trust people who trust them. Often you ask somebody, why do you trust your boss? Why? Because they trust me. In other words, you empower them. That's what gives you power. And thirdly, people trust people who are fair. In other words, as an individual leader, you get this discipline and reward thing right. You do that and your people will trust you. On a broader level, if you are part of a senior leadership team and you really want to, doesn't mean it's low trust. You could have reasonable levels of trust. You just want to make them even better. What do you need to do to actually cultivate trust in the collective? You need to first and foremost invert this line of service from they are there to serve me to I'm there to serve them. Secondly, you saw the hierarchy. It doesn't help if the CEO is caring and growing the management members on their team. You have to establish or cultivate these legitimate relationships of power at every level in the hierarchy. Otherwise, this thing doesn't work. And then here's the point I think that we're making again is you make what you are focused on, what you're endeavoring to achieve is exceptional people. Exceptional people will produce exceptional results. And the final one, which is not easy, is you've got to change what you measure and reward managers for. And that is not the results they get out of people. You need to measure and reward managers for the caliber of the people in their charge. Okay, sounds easy. Hard work, but produces some quite dramatic positive outcomes.